My name is Carissa Brewster, and I am the writer for Whitman Partners. And we are starting our series of interviews for the 40 Fast and Future Leaders of Surgical Services for 2023. And our first interview is with Kendall Carter. Can you say what your position is and the facility that you're at?
Sure. I'm the director of surgical services at Boulder Community Health in Boulder, Colorado. Well, I mean, navigating COVID was something. I think pretty much every healthcare leader that was in leadership at the time that really it tested you every way across the board. I think switching organizations helped challenge me as a leader, kind of going from the known to the unknown and from where you're comfortable to something completely different. Um, I think those particularly helped. And then I think really having leaders who challenged me to step up and see what I could accomplish actually did the most to help me grow as a leader. Um, I mean, I think part of it is acknowledging part of it that some people may not want to hear. It is part of it is advocating for compensation in certain areas. It's just the reality. I find today's generation is everything's immediate. Attention is the new currency, and everything there, it's not a long-term commitment to anything because everything is at your fingertips. I want it now, I have it now. There's no going to a library. I have the internet and everything at my fingertips. There's no renting a movie and going to Blockbuster to check it out. It's on my phone and I have it right now. And so when you just look at kind of the changes culturally, just overall, and I watch media from young, I mean, I'm in my 40s and I watch like my nieces and nephews who are in their 20s and my son, they're, they don't have the idea that they're going to work somewhere for 40 years. Like their idea is I'm going to go somewhere that's going to pay me now. And if someone's going to pay me more, I will go there as soon as I can. And so I think it's been tough for organizations to really stop using old tools and ideas to address a new problem. And part of that problem is compensation. Things are getting more expensive. And so just as it is for organizations to function, that same inflation is hitting frontline staff. And so we can't, it's hard to live in a day where hospitals pay less than surgery centers because now people will just go. You know what I mean? They'll just take that leap. And so part of it is compensation. Part of it is honestly supporting our team through what their needs are and being very open in communication with them on assessing what those needs are. The two things I kind of harp on with my team are respect and value. And it's me making sure that they feel respected and valued. Part of that value is compensation. Part of that value is just making sure that I value their time and respect their time. So it's making sure we're staffed so they're not getting phone calls every day to come in extra. It's respecting their time away and valuing. They've already put in their time here. I need to make sure we're staffed to the point where we're not calling them every day. The only people working extra are the people requesting to work extra, not us asking them repeatedly. And I think those things have helped with our retention and growth and kind of stabilization here over the past 2 years. I would say vulnerability. I learned so maybe 4 years ago, we did kind of a 365 review where people kind of put in their feedback on you as a leader. And I scored really high in some of the things I thought I would, but in some of the others I scored very low. And really the feedback from my team was I was very closed off and disconnected. And to me, I knew I was doing that, but I thought it was for a good reason. I thought it was kind of creating that separation of buddy to boss and not getting too friendly, so to speak. But what it inadvertently did was made me seem very distant and closed off from them and made it hard for them to connect. And so I think taking that feedback, working with coaching, I think if you're at an organization that offers coaching, people think it's like a sign of weakness to use coaching, and it's an immensely valuable tool. And if you have that option, you should definitely embrace it. But it really taught me to use my vulnerability as more of a strength than it is a weakness. And so being open is a way of being vulnerable, right? You let people in and it is showing some vulnerability, but it does help form those bonds. And so I think I saw an immediate change in a lot of relationships by doing that. And so it's just something I've incorporated and I enjoy a lot of, uh, like I make a lot of small talk with my staff, but I know who they are and I know what they're doing and I know what's going on in their life. And I don't know that because I'm not interrogating them. They'll typically just stop by my office and come by to chat and they'll tell me about the apartment they're trying to rent or their new dog or just random things. And I think it's because I've showed that vulnerability and let them in and we create those relationships now where they're comfortable having that discussion. I think number one, when they don't feel heard, even if typically, even if the answer or the news isn't what they wanted to hear, if they don't feel that you've heard them or you respect them or value them, again, I go back to those kind of tenets. I think those make it very easy for them to become disengaged and move on. And so I very much like to, with our team, solicit them for feedback and try to get them engaged in initiatives and projects and changes that we have coming. But I also like to be completely upfront and open with them and as transparent as I can in communications with them. And so not leaving people in the dark, closing the loop sometimes and saying, hey, that was a great idea. I did take it to our IT team. You know, it looks like Epic doesn't have the functionality to do that thing you wanted to do. So it's like, unfortunately, it's not going to happen. But please, like when you see these things, keep bringing them up in the future. I'm happy to raise the concern, see what we can do. The worst that can happen is they say no. But really, really making sure that they feel heard and valued, and you've really taken kind of what they're giving you. I think that's the biggest challenge is when people don't feel that, when they feel everything's handed down to them, they don't have a say in anything, and no one really respects or values what they're bringing to the table. I mean, I think the biggest implementation of AI in the operating room that we'll see will likely have a lot more to do with probably a lot of robotic surgery in a sense. Um, it's helping, like it's easier to implement AI in those kind of visual aids versus workflow things in healthcare at this point, particularly in surgery. However, I do think AI is a tool that's already here and a lot of people don't know it and don't realize it. And they don't realize how much it plays in the background. They think of AI as Star Trek technology with completely sentient robots, and they don't really understand that's not essentially what AI is in the sense that we're talking about here. I think I think it can be a very valuable tool. I'm huge on innovation and technology and love to see the things we can accomplish. I do think there are some inherent dangers with AI. I've seen a couple documentaries and some research around uh, just kind of humankind's inherent bias. Like the people making AI are generally a lot of white people programming the AI. And so normal, when you tell an AI program to paint a picture, it inadvertently always will almost always paint a white person's face, right? And it's not that they're racistness, like that's not what I'm saying. It's just their inherent bias for them. That's normal. That's what they see every day.
Totally. Hmm.
And so I think in healthcare, that's where it gets particularly dangerous because you have so many different subgroups, ethnic groups, et cetera, that you need that technology to function for. You have to make sure that that bias kind of isn't there as it's assisting you. So I do think, again, I think it'll pop up more. Initially, people will start to realize it in a lot of the the visualization and digital imagery that we use for surgery. I saw an amazing one really that laid out a 3D CT spine with augmented reality glasses that really felt like a huge leap forward compared to what we do now. Um, but so it's kind of my feelings on the subject as a whole. It's very hard to know. Like I don't know how much Epic actually uses AI in the background. You know what I mean? But I'm sure in different parts of these programs that we use across healthcare, it's already been implemented. People just don't actually know what's happening. Close to my heart that I would want to talk about. That's a great question. I would want to talk about something I don't necessarily have the answers for. I know that sounds weird, but I think it's about how, again, I feel like a lot of healthcare, we're stuck trying to use old methods for new problems. And now it's like 4 years post-COVID, it's not even that new anymore. Um, but talking about how we really get innovative about changing the setup and the paradigm in this industry, like how do we truly move forward? Like everyone else is moving forward past us. How do we start moving forward with them instead of staying behind in this old methodology here? I think one part of it's, I think a big one that I've discovered is really with coding and billing. I've discovered a lot of coding and billing errors where there are a lot of codes that are essentially catch-all codes that a lot of billers will use. And insurance companies don't like paying for catch-all codes. They want to pay for specific things. So when you use a code that's essentially every other urology procedure, they're going to pay you way less. And so one, I think making sure your coding and billing are on point and are following the guidelines for the vendors and items that you're using to get the most out of your reimbursement. I think it's interesting talking about reimbursement because organizations will be very, um, I don't want to say in disbelief or shock, but are very kind of flabbergasted by the low rates that insurance companies will offer for reimbursement, right? Well, I can't believe they're only giving us 4%. And then you see a lot of organizations will still turn around to their frontline staff and they'll like straight face tell them, we're going to give you a 3% raise. And it's like, if you're shocked about 4%, how are you not shocked when you're telling them 3%? Like it's the same thing. So I think that billing and coding one is a big one. I think the other one is it really instituting processes to review what you're using product wise, what your contractual obligations are, and what really is the right move for your organization. I do a lot of work with our materials team and our supply chain team constantly. It's something you can't just do and stop doing, to constantly review what are we using? What do our providers want to use? Okay, how do we align those contractually then to get the best price possible? And sometimes it is getting providers involved in making that decision and saying, listen, we've done everything we can to get this thing you want. It still costs 5 times as much as this other thing. So what can we do now to get everyone to this other thing? Because this other one, it's just making your case as a financial loss at this point. And then I think it's really making sure they have what they need clinically at that point, but explaining that to them. I think most providers are pretty amenable to making those changes when necessary, but you have to involve them in that entire process. You have to give them that same agency I was talking about for frontline staff to be involved in those decisions. But I think those are the biggest ways to improve profitability. I'd say the other one really is reputation. People don't realize, again, it's a very I need it now world. And it's word of mouth is when I type your name into Facebook, like what comes up? When I type your name on Twitter, what's the hashtag around Boulder Community Health? And what are people saying? And so the only real way for organizations to deal with that is to make sure they're providing that service that makes people want to say something positive about their experience, and that sticks with people as they're in that social media realm. Yeah. So it's interesting. It reminds me of a question when I interviewed for a position, and the question was essentially, who's your target audience as a surgical services director? And my answer was, it depends on what I'm trying to accomplish. And so who's the hardest to win over? It depends on what we're trying to do. Am I trying to move a physician away from a product, again, because it costs so much versus a different product that we're contracted with? They're the hardest to win over in that case. Am I trying to open up some block time for them? Oh, they're the easiest to win over in that case. They're 100% on board, and whatever I need, they'll be there for it. Administration, am I finding a way to reduce costs somehow, or am I taking them a big multi-million-dollar capital purchase? They're very difficult to win over in that second scenario. But if I bring them something that says, hey, this will probably cut costs by 40 grand a year if we move to this thing, they're very easy to win over in that case. And the same with direct reports. It very much matters what I'm trying to do and trying to accomplish. If I'm instituting a call team that's going to reduce their call burden by half, it's very easy to get most of the team on board with that. But if we're instituting something that changes pay in any fashion, it's very difficult to get the frontline staff and seasoned direct reports on board. So again, it just kind of, you have to make sure when you're moving into any manager, director kind of role, you have to know the audience you're talking to. When I'm talking to the executive board, I don't get into the minutia and details of clinical things. They're very much, they want a very high level view of things. They don't want that. When I'm talking to a physician about something, they may want more of that discussion. And so you really need to know who your audience is that you're going to be dealing with on a certain subject at a certain time. Tailor your communication to that audience. Give them the information that's relevant to them, that they want to know when you're presenting it. And I think there's never one that's always the hardest. It's just different depending on what you're trying to accomplish. I always tell people when they say change is hard, I always say change isn't that hard. It's change that we don't like or change we don't have control over that doesn't meet our expectations. That's what's hard. If I come to you and say, hey, here's $10 million, it's going to change your life. And it's going to be very easy for you to accept that change.
Mm-hmm.
When I bring you change that doesn't meet your expectations of what you want to happen, that's when it becomes difficult for people, and you have to motivate and engage them to kind of move forward on that subject.
So thanks a lot for agreeing to this interview.